Hello everybody and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about making unique characters, specifically for this time talking about iced themed builds and concepts for your character. So what we're going to be doing in this is I'm going to be talking a lot about the different ways that you can use ice in your character ideas in order to make a more fleshed out and unique character, as well as being able to build upon a little bit more of a unique style, because a lot of the times you will see a lot of people use the exact same concepts or builds. I mean, say you're going to go watch Disney's Frozen. No judgment. It's a movie that exists. But say you're going to go watch that and you get inspired by Elsa and you want to make a build with that kind of character. Or if you wanted to use a little bit better of a movie, just in my opinion, you could also go with Frozone from The Incredibles. But either way, you see a movie or a TV show or you read a book and they have this cool ice themed character and you decide, I like that idea. I really want to play that in Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of times you will see the same way of doing that over and over again. My intention with these videos is to give you guys a broader way of thinking about it, to run you through a few concepts that you are more than willing to take and run with, or hopefully they can inspire you to make your own different ideas, and eventually you can begin to create your own character. And then at the end, I will run you through some questions to think through that will hopefully help you create a unique character that even if they were against or side by side with somebody very similar to them, you could see some distinct differences in their personality, because a lot of the times mechanics and role play should inform each other. Actually, that's a good idea. I should do a video on that at some point. I know that I have in the past on a different channel. Anyways, so to start with for today, what we're going to be talking about is the things that I would use mechanically to create an ice-themed character. Now, this is not an overview of everything that you could use. It's not an overview of everything that you should use. What it is the things that immediately jump out to me that you can make an ice character with that I would want to make an ice-themed character with. There are other things that you can use. This is just what initially jumped out at me the first time I thought about it and did a little bit of research. So let's jump right in. The first thing that immediately comes to mind, and I'm pretty sure comes to a lot of people's mind when you're like, I want to create an ice-themed character, Dragonborn. Anytime you want to make an element-themed character in D&D 5e, Dragonborn is a great way to go. You want to know why? Because they can choose different elements that they have resistances to thanks to their lineage of color. So for those of you who don't know, in 5th edition, there are two different types of dragons. Well, actually, there's a lot of different other types of dragons, but right now there are only rules for these two different types of dragons, and I think a sapphire dragon, but that's in its own supplement, whatever. We're just going to talk about the first two. The first one is chromatic dragons. These are your typical Roy G. Biv rainbow colors: red, blue, green, black. Those are considered chromatic dragons, and evil dragons, depends on what you want in your world. But and metallic dragons also have their own thing where basically they also have these elements that they're associated with, but they're metallic. That's a little bit of a rant. It has nothing to do with what I'm talking about now. But the point is, the reason you can choose them for any element is because they basically have a race defined by their color, scale color. Maybe I should cut that part. But the reason that you can choose Dragonborns to basically choose any element that you want is based off the color of their scales. They get a resistance to a certain type of damage. And so for Dragonborns, a white Dragonborn or a silver Dragonborn will have resistance to cold damage. Therefore, obviously, they would be a pick if you wanted to make a cold-themed character. The next thing that immediately comes to mind is Goliaths. So Goliaths also do have some resistances to cold, and it's because they have something called Mountain-born. They were born up in the mountains, they have resistances to the weather, and they're used to living up in these cold, frigid climates that are up in the air. Goliaths are cool. I like them a lot, and I think they're a little underutilized. Obviously, in Critical Role, they were used a little bit more thanks to one of the players, Grog. He was playing a Goliath barbarian, and that did give them a boost. They are very cool. They're half giant. They are a little bit ice themed. I like Goliaths a lot, and I really like the idea of somebody who's lived up in the mountains in these frigid temperatures and has been molded and created by it. So Goliath is a good start. Another one that I would think of is any animal race. There are a lot of animal races in D&D, okay? There's Aarakocras, there's Leonins. I think that's how it's pronounced. Comment down below if that's not how you pronounce that. I apologize. There's also turtles. Any animal race, guys, can be themed pretty much any way you want, because here's the deal. This is D&D. You can change a little bit about these races without breaking anything. For example, Aarakocra. The image that the monster manual initially uses for them and that you see on the racial guide in the elemental guide, the evil, there's a supplement out there about elemental stuff, and that's where you can find the Aarakocras. Anyways, it shows this kind of like eagle-ish type creature. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be any avian creature you want. So you could create a snow owl, which I think would be really cool. Same thing for leonins. Again, please comment down below if that is not how you pronounce that. They can be reflavored as snow leopards. You could be a snow leopard creature. And then for turtles, I mean, shoot, obviously you're not going to find turtles out in the frigid cold, but I love the idea of a turtle that has a frozen over shell and is hunched over. He's got like eyebrow ridges that have frozen in these icicles. I think that's super cool. So yeah, basically you can use any animal race and flavor it how you want for when you want to make a very specific type of themed character. And lastly, at least on my mind, is the Ganassi. Ganassi are elemental themed races, right? They are elemental themed and they have some of the elements built into their bloodline thanks to genies. So when I'm thinking about them, I think you could choose air and theme it more around the frigid gusts of a blizzard, or water and theme it around maybe frozen water that is moving, and so it can't quite freeze, but it's always just frigid. Either of those I think could work pretty well. I think it would also be pretty fun to play a water Ganassi and deal with the fact that you have a lot of ice themed powers, but unfortunately there is ice within you, and it's a constant battle between what's within you as a water Ganassi and the powers that you hold. I think a sorcerer with those kind of powers would be super cool. Next up is subclasses, and the same way that I started with Dragonborn in the last one, I'm going to get this out of the way. Anytime you want to make an elemental themed build, Draconic Sorcerer is a great way to go. It allows you to choose certain damage types that you're really good at. It allows you to have certain resistances. It allows you to have better health. I mean, really, just that's a no-brainer. I'm going to try and go for a little bit more, but if you want to pick that, that is a great option anytime you want to make an elemental thing build. Next up, a little bit of an oddball, and something that I actually really like to do and have mentioned in previous videos on another channel, Aurora Borealis. I think the Aurora Borealis is really cool because it is associated with the poles, right? It is in these cold climates where you see it up in the sky, this beautiful, strange alien radiant light. And with that knowledge in mind, I think Divine Soul could be really cool. Divine Soul is mostly based around healing, but at some point you do get wings that flare out behind you. I think it would be super cool to theme those as this Aurora Borealis light shining out and allowing you to fly into the air. Eventually you get the chance to just heal yourself. I would flavor that as being enraptured by this light and bursting out. And you also get, most importantly, access to the full cleric spell list to choose from your spells. Choosing any of those radiant spells or healing spells and flavoring it as Aurora Borealis, this light, alien, beautiful, just flowing out of you and healing or dealing damage. Honestly, in my opinion, you can't go wrong with that. And on that exact same note, with that same radiance theme with the Aurora Borealis, Circle of Stars Druid. You could do the exact same thing with the exact sort of flavor, and I think that's just a really cool concept. So keep those in mind if you wanted to create a cool theme build, but maybe lean a little bit more on the Radiant side as well. You could really have a lot of options with that. On the Barbarian side, there's the Storm Heralds. Storm Heralds are super cool. They actually allow you to choose different types of storms. And you can choose Blizzard, and you can choose to go down that path and not have to do a whole lot of reflavoring either. You can just choose the cold and just go straight with that. And on that level, you could also choose Ancestral Guardian, which I know that seems like a little bit of an oddball pick, but while I was looking through this, I saw that and started to think, if you guys didn't know, there are tons, and I mean tons, of bodies that were lost and never found on the climb to Mount Everest. In fact, some of them were frozen over and are actually used as landmarks for climbers who are trying to get to the top of Mount Everest. Blizzards and cold and avalanches claim a ton of bodies every year, and they are never found. They are trapped. And so in a world with magic, don't you think that when that happens, those spirits of those lost souls would be trapped within the storm that created their demise? And so I had this idea of an ancestral barbarian whose ancestor guardians are not actually their ancestors, but are the ghosts of the people who were lost within the blizzard. And this barbarian is the guardian of this tempest of blizzard that surrounds them. And the souls there must fight with them in order to reclaim their undeath and move on, therefore redeeming themselves and moving forward. So your barbarian is kind of this gateway of helping people through to the other side and giving them another chance to make it to wherever it is they're going after death. Kind of a weird idea, but I thought it was really fun and you could roll with. And lastly, another idea that's kind of off the cuff is basically any paladin oath, specifically Oathbreaker. And I know that's a little odd, but it doesn't really specifically have anything to do with the mechanics, but the flavor that I was thinking of. Imagine if your paladin had broken their oath and they were trying to redeem themselves and reclaim what they once had. And so as a punishment, their deity, whoever they had devoted themselves to, stole their warmth. They're constantly covered in cold, icicles falling off of their armor. There's a frost that always emanates out of their mouth. Their hair is constantly crusted in this thin layer of ice. Just frozen, always frigid, never can quite get warm. And the only time they begin to feel warm is when they're fighting for the cause that they originally gave their oath to, and when they smite, the divine radiance burns away this cold, leading them to want to give themselves to their deity, leading them to want to try and do everything they can to smite the unholy, to bring that warmth back into them, because the only time they can feel it is when they're devoting themselves. Again, a little bit of an off-the-wall idea, but I thought it was really fun and could be very fun for a villain or an NPC if a DM wanted to do that. To be honest with you, I'm probably going to create that at some point as an NPC, so hopefully my players never see this video. Oh, and one more idea that I kind of forgot to mention, Swarmkeeper Druids are very cool, and the book actually tells you, hey, pick an animal of these mystical swarms that come out. And so you could choose little tiny mites that are white, and so when they come flooding out and you send the swarm, it looks like a blizzard is going to attack. Just an idea. The next thing we're going to talk about when it comes to making a cold-themed character is spells. Spells are super important. If you're going to play a spellcasting class or subclass of any type, choosing your spells is usually how you're going to make your elemental-themed character, especially ice. And there are actually not a lot of ice-themed spells in D&D. They're kind of far and few between. And so I'm going to run through some spells you could reflavor as ice if they really don't have enough spells or don't have a lot that want to fit what you're going for. And I've made sure to get them in a lot of different levels of spells so you have some options. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is Aid. Aid is a very simple spell. It gives extra health to whoever you cast it on. Now you could easily reflavor this as just this coat of ice that surrounds your allies or yourself that gives them extra protection, and that extra HP that they get is actually that ice protecting them, and the ice can actually reform if it is healed. So when they get healed, the ice comes back and continues to protect them. Next up is Horrid Wilting. Now Horrid Wilting is a necrotic damage spell, but I think it's real easy to flavor otherwise. What it does is it causes this wilting effect that just deals necrotic damage and withers everything around it. It is real easy to reflavor that to just say that your cold is so biting, so horrific, so draining that it is withering everything around you in this area and you are drawing the heat out of it. Doesn't have to be any different damage. It's still necrotic damage, but you can flavor it to be cold, and I think that's really cool. Next up is Bane. Bane is a very simple spell that subtracts a d4 from everybody you cast it on. I think it's pretty easy and simple to just say, turn off my goddamn phone. Okay, anyways. Next up is Bane. Now, Bane is a very simple spell that subtracts a d4 from checks that the enemies make that you cast it on. And it is real easy to reflavor this as you are freezing the blood in their veins, bringing it colder, causing them to slow down, and they can't quite move as quick as they want. And on the same level, on a much higher level, actually, to be honest with you, is Slow. Slow is the same sort of flavor, but a very different mechanical effect. It doesn't subtract a d4. It prevents your enemies entirely from using an action, a bonus action, or a move or reaction in the same turn. They have to pick and choose what they're allowed to do. In fact, I'm sorry, I don't have the rules. Let's see. Actually, I just looked up the rules. You can't use reaction when you have Slow, so you can flavor it as you are freezing the blood in their veins, not just turning it cold, but freezing it and preventing them from moving, taking what is already a very effective spell and flavor-wise, causing it to be a much more terrifying and oppressive force. Next up is Barkskin. Barkskin is very simple. It turns your skin hard and allows you to be more protected. That's easy enough. Your skin becomes like ice, or ice forms along your skin. Pretty simple. And then the last spell that I have today is Bigby's Hand, or just known as Arcane Hand if you're looking at a different version of it. But basically, this creates this magical force hand that can go smack things or get in the way of things or pick things up. It's a very cool, useful utility spell. Easy enough. Just flavor it as ice. It's this big ice hand that is moving along and you are controlling it. Simple as that. As for feats that you can use, there aren't a lot of feats that specifically have anything to do with elements. Obviously, the first one that pops into mind is Elemental Adept. That is a very sound mechanical thing that allows you to bypass immunity and resistances when it comes to using your elemental spells. If you wanted to reflavor other feats to fit ice, one I think of is Chef. You could use Chef. Now, it's not anything specifically mechanically with ice, but I think it's fun to have an ice-themed character who is capable of keeping his food cold like his own refrigerator, and he cooks for his friends. Chef is not the best feat in the world, but I like it a lot for its flavor and its role-play potential. Any feat that grants any sort of spell or cantrip is a-okay, because you can choose any ice stuff, Ray of Frost, you can reflavor things. Those are good for this kind of character. Tough and durable as well. Those are really good. You can flavor them as your constitution has been hardened because of how much you've had to survive in the cold and the harshest climates in the world, and you are just that tough. And lastly, skilled and skill expert, I think, are really fun because they kind of play into the fact that you've been living in a very harsh, cold climate. You've been living there for a long time. You have learned to survive, and you have these skills because of your life experience. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, when making an ice-themed character, there are a lot of ice-themed characters out there. And a lot of the times, if you're a player like me, you want your character to feel unique. What do they bring to the table that the other characters don't? I think it's a very good question to ask yourself to create a truly engaging and unique character that will be memorable. So what I suggest is asking yourself the following question. What makes my character's ice unique? Now, that doesn't mean specifically the ice that they create, what's unique about it. You can focus on different flavors and different ways of casting ice that make your casting of ice different than other casters in the game. Ways of doing this is focusing on a few different things. You could focus on the intensity of ice. It's cold, its frigidness, the fact that it freezes everything around it. Or you could focus on the beauty of the ice, the way that sun glints off of it, the way that the light refracts through it. It brings a strange, cool wonder to the world. Or you could focus on the toughness of ice, how hard it is to break, how unmoving it is. Or lastly, you could just focus on the fact that it freezes things. Ice is terrifying and refreshing, but it blocks things in place and keeps them from moving. So truthfully, at the end of the day, what I would do is focus on ice, think about it, really find a way to make your ice feel unique and what it focuses on. The cool thing about that is it also leads into the next part and the last part of this video, which is going to be asking yourself very simple questions. How does the ice theme inform my character's roleplay? This is very important because your ice has affected your character, so much so that they've decided to devote themselves to figuring it out and being themed around it, which will inherently affect how they act and who they are. So, in order to be able to find how this part of your character affects your roleplay and who they are, I would ask yourself the following questions. 1, think about why they use ice. Were they born in an inhospitable land? Were they raised in this terrible environment where all they knew was ice, and so ice is the only thing there? They know it to be dangerous, and they also know it to be the only thing that protects them. Has this led to them being socially awkward or a little bit inept, not really knowing how to interact with other people because they're not used to doing so? They were out on their own. 2, I would think about what ice means to this character. Do they resent ice? Do they hate it because of how hard it made their lives and how long they had to grow up living with it? And so now that they have some form of control over it, it gives them a sense of power? Do they respect ice? Do they know how incredibly potent it is and know that it's dangerous, but also know that it kept them alive for some time? Maybe they made igloos out of it. They used it to keep their food cool. And so while they are fearful of it, they know what it does. They also respect it and find it an incredibly useful tool, or even treat it almost as an old friend. Or do they simply marvel at the unique beauty that is ice, the strangeness that it brings, and decide to follow their entire time learning how to control this very strange element within the world? And then lastly, and this is really a question I would ask no matter what character you're playing, is what does your character need to learn over the course of the campaign? Specifically, in this case, what does your character need to learn about ice? When people have these fixations on certain elements, usually it's because they are fascinated by them and they want to learn something about it. But they also need to learn a lesson they don't understand. For example, say your character treats ice as this immovable object because it has been their whole life. Well, they have to learn that it can be melted, that it can be removed, they can't hide it behind it forever. Well, they have to learn that ice is not the ultimate tool to solve everything, but instead how they use it. Or they need to learn that ice is beautiful, not just deadly. Maybe they hate ice. Maybe they're trying to control it because it gives them a sense of power in the world. But over the course of the campaign, they learn that ice can also be beautiful and useful, and it's all in how you look at it rather than what it's done to you in your past. Or perhaps they need to learn not to use it frivolously and learn that ice is a dangerous tool. Maybe they've figured out that they could control ice, and over the course of the campaign, they realize that's a dangerous thing, and they must treat that gift with sincerity and seriousness. Ultimately, I would always ask yourself, what does my character need to learn over the course of the campaign? It adds a dynamic and a uniqueness and allows you to have more to do when it comes to role-playing. Even if your character is purely combat-based, this allows you to have a different element, and it allows you to have more interesting interactions, not only with other party members, but the world around you. I would always ask those sort of questions to flesh things out and give yourself a more unique and, well, more fulfilling role-playing experience in general. It's worked well for me, and I hope it can work well for you guys. Anyways, that's really all I have on Ice Themed Roleplays. A lot of this was rambling and just going over some of my notes of just what I would do if I made an Ice Themed character. There are so many other things, and a lot of the stuff I said here probably won't work for everybody. But I hope it can give at least a little inspiration to make you feel like you can go out and make a unique character next time you want to play, and hopefully give you some inspiration to make the best character that you can. I really hope you guys had a good time today, and I hope that you continue to live life to the fullest and enjoy every day. Don't allow the world to get you down. Instead, go out and make it yours. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.